Now, South Africa is marking 30 years since its transition to democracy from the racial segregation of apartheid. President Cyril Ramaphosa has led celebrations in Pretoria. His government is expected to face its sternest test in next month's elections. South Africa is one of the continent's leading economies, but severe poverty and rising unemployment have dampened much of the optimism from 30 years ago. Today, many of those who fought against apartheid are still demanding justice for the crimes they suffered, as Dianne Hawker reports now from Johannesburg.
What they say is a fight for justice on the steps of South Africa's Constitutional Court. Members of the Galela movement have spent the last 5 months camping here on the court steps. They say many victims of apartheid-era crimes are being ignored, even though the government has a fund worth $100 million for reparations. Nomarashia Bonase is the group's leader and says many of the members missed out on the truth and reconciliation process.
I feel down, and I feel the government is not doing any justice, not only to me, to each and every victim in South Africa, by not allowing, by not even creating that platform. Because I feel like it's a part one, is a healing session to speak out, to be listened at, and at the same time to be redressed.
Bonase says she was beaten by apartheid police while working as an activist. But perhaps the most painful scar is the loss of her brother. She says he was murdered by the army in 1993 during a vigil for liberation activist Chris Hani.
It took about a week not knowing where his whereabouts, his body, until I had to go to the government mortuary in Germiston, where I found a packed of corpse, dead bodies who were packed like bags of cement on top of, in order to get to know his body. I have to ask also the person who was working there, can you help me? Because I feel like my brother is amongst those.
Bonase says his death was never investigated. The sister organization, the Khulumani Support Group, has 130,000 statements from people who missed out during the TRC process. Statements it says the government should consider. It says many victims were not comfortable to speak out so soon after apartheid, while others didn't have the means.
The state never announced where the TRC statement takers would be. I mean, it was pure luck if you even heard of it. And then also because people were basically really destitute already at that time, they didn't have money to take taxis to go to the statement takers. Those were some of the very practical problems. We have documented this all for the Department of Justice because we think it's completely unjustified to just close the doors when all this work has been documented and the flaws are actually on the side of the state, you know.
Despite the research and despite the protest, the government says it's too late to reopen cases. When it comes to the people that are currently living outside the Constitutional Court, are you saying that they should simply go home?
Yes, they should go home. And we raised it with them when we were there, that there is no need for them to be there out in the cold on this thing, because ourselves, there is nothing that we can do. The parliament has the list, is closed, the regulations are done through the processes of parliament, and it will be a regularity for us to open the list.
The South African government says it will use the reparation fund for housing, education and healthcare for the 21,000 people on the current list. Members of the Galela victims group say the only thing stopping the government from putting more people on that list is a lack of political will. After decades of writing letters and lobbying, they hope their physical presence at the heart of the justice system might shame the government into action.
Joining me now is our correspondent Dianne Hawker in Pretoria, South Africa. Hello, Dianne. Happy Freedom Day to you. It's been 30 years since the end of apartheid, 30 years of South Africa being a democracy. How would you describe the progress made to achieve racial equality?
Well, Eddie, thank you, and happy Freedom Day to you too, although you're not in South Africa. The progress to achieve freedom here in South Africa, I would say, has had some positives and some negatives. To a certain extent, there has been a lot of progress made, and the lives of many South Africans have definitely improved as a result of attaining democracy. Small things like even being able to come to the union buildings where I stand today as a black South African would not have been allowed under apartheid, because it was amongst the public spaces in which black people were not allowed to freely access. There are also other things like some families have received housing from the government. Things like water provision have also improved over the years, and there's been an extensive rollout of electricity to parts of the country that didn't have. That being said, there are still a lot of concerns that our democracy and freedom has not gone far enough because of the high levels of inequality, the high level of joblessness, and to a certain extent, the high level of frustration that many people are feeling in South Africa at the moment.
So how is the government responding to these challenges? Because you're right, people still feel the government has not done enough. From your report, we saw people that still say they are seeking compensation, but there doesn't seem to be appetite from the government to address that issue and many other issues.
Absolutely. I think that the issues of frustration go far and wide, and they go across socio-economic backgrounds. Today, for example, at the event that I was attending, a young man was protesting, saying that he protested saying freedom is not free in South Africa. And he explained the reason that he was protesting to say, as a young South African of 35 years old, it's difficult for him to get a job. It's difficult for him to pursue his preferred career path. And he feels that the government should be making it easier for young South Africans to be able to get jobs. So there are a lot of frustrations like that you come across. Whether the South African government is addressing it, it really depends on who do you speak to. Some people say that they feel the government has done enough and that their lives have changed. But others are saying that it's time for new political parties to take the helm and for them to be given a chance to make a change in South Africa. Of course, it's an election year here, and that means that those issues will be firmly on the table when it comes time for South Africans to vote.
Right. I mean, let's hammer a little bit on that, Dianne, because, as you say, you're right. In its 30 years of democracy, South Africa has only been governed by the ANC. How could that dominance be tested ahead of the upcoming election, barring all the challenges we've talked about?
Well, from the previous local government election, what is clear is that in large municipalities like Pretoria, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, as well as Cape Town in the Western Cape, the support for the ANC has been dwindling over the past few years. And many political analysts predict that they will lose a lot of ground, particularly in urban areas. This is where other political parties do stand to gain a number of votes. There's also a lot of interesting new players who are entering this election, such as the MK party, which is led by former President Jacob Zuma, and a lot of other new parties. And this will mean that the ANC will really have to work hard to get people's votes. Yes, they have been in government for the past 30 years, but it also means that people have 30 years of seeing what the ANC can do to judge them against, unlike other newer parties, Eddie.
Right. Dianne Hawker in Pretoria. Thank you.